Human mechanic fixed the crying hatchling's toy. Unaware, the Dragon Emperor watched. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The repair station on Outpost Gamma 7 was a cluttered sanctuary of tools, spare parts, and the comforting smell of machine oil. For Marcus Dean, it was home, the only place in this massive interstellar hub where humans weren't constantly reminded they were the newest and least advanced species in the Galactic Confederation. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow as he finished reassembling the anti-gravity stabilizer for a Vexillian merchant vessel. The aliens had looked at him with their characteristic disdain when he told them it would take 3 hours to fix, as if his human hands were too primitive to properly service their technology. He had completed the job in 2, not that they would notice or care. Station announcement. Repair bay will close in 30 minutes. All non-essential personnel, please begin shutdown procedures. The automated system chirped overhead. Marcus nodded to himself. Just enough time to finish logging his work and clean up before heading back to the cramped human quarters. 6 years since humanity had been graciously welcomed into the Galactic Confederation, and they were still treated like curious pets at best, potential vermin at worst. Humans were relegated to manual labor positions that most advanced species considered beneath them. Marcus, despite having been one of Earth's top robotics engineers, found himself working as a simple mechanic, fixing toys and household devices that the station's more sophisticated residents couldn't be bothered to repair themselves. The repair station door hissed open. Marcus didn't look up, assuming it was his supervisor coming to check his progress. "We're closed," he called out, still focused on his terminal. Official hours start again at station dawn, 0600. A strange sound, something between a hiccup and a chirp, made Marcus turn. Standing in the doorway was not his supervisor, but a small draconian hatchling, barely reaching his knee. The child was clutching what appeared to be a broken toy to its scaled chest. Tears glistened on its iridescent cheeks. Marcus froze. Draconians were among the most powerful and feared species in the Confederation. Their empire spanned hundreds of worlds, and their technology was centuries beyond human understanding. They rarely interacted with other species, especially not humans. And here was a hatchling, alone, in his repair shop. "I am sorry," Marcus said, quickly standing. "Are you lost? Where are your guardians?" The hatchling made another chirping sound, this one clearly distressed, and held out the broken toy. It was a complex mechanical dragon that, when functioning, probably flew and breathed harmless colored flames. Now, one wing hung limply, and its internal lights flickered pathetically. "Your toy?" Marcus asked gently, kneeling to the hatchling's level. "It's broken?" The young draconian nodded, amber eyes wide and pleading. Every instinct told Marcus to call station security immediately. Draconians were fiercely protective of their young. If the hatchling's parents discovered it alone with a human, there would be diplomatic consequences at best, possibly violent ones at worst. But the little one looked so distraught, its scaled wings drooping in perfect mimicry of its toy's damaged appendage. "Okay," Marcus sighed, holding out his hand. "Let me take a look." The hatchling hesitated, then carefully placed the toy in Marcus's palm. It was heavier than he expected, made of materials he didn't recognize. The craftsmanship was exquisite, clearly a high-value item. "Come on, let's see what's wrong with your friend here," Marcus said, gesturing to his workbench. The hatchling followed, wiping tears from its face with small clawed hands. Marcus cleared a space and set the toy down. "What's your name?" "I'm Marcus." The hatchling made a series of clicks and trills that Marcus couldn't hope to pronounce. His translator implant, standard issue for all humans in Confederation space, rendered it as Kira. "Nice to meet you." "Kira," Marcus smiled. "Is this your favorite toy?" Kira nodded vigorously, then made a flying motion with her hands. "It flies? And the wing is broken?" Marcus guessed. Another eager nod. As Marcus began examining the toy, he kept an eye on the door, expecting angry draconian parents or security officers to burst in at any moment. But the station remained quiet as night cycle approached. The toy's construction was like nothing Marcus had ever seen. Opening the access panel revealed circuitry that seemed to flow like liquid metal, pulsing with energy. Despite the alien technology, the mechanical principles were familiar enough. The wing joint had been damaged, causing a disruption in the power flow. "I think I can fix this," Marcus told Kira, who had climbed onto a stool to watch him work, her tail swishing with anticipation. "It might take a little while, though. Shouldn't you let someone know where you are?" Kira shook her head firmly, then pointed at the toy with urgency. Okay, Marcus chuckled. "But if I get vaporized by your parents for this, I'm going to be very disappointed." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus worked carefully, using his finest tools to repair the delicate wing joint. The internal mechanisms were self-healing to some degree, requiring only proper alignment and a power reset. All the while, Kira watched with fascination, occasionally making encouraging chirps when Marcus made progress. "You know," Marcus said as he worked, "on Earth, I used to design robotic systems for deep space exploration. Now I mostly fix coffee makers and entertainment units." He smiled ruefully. "But this, your toy, this is the most interesting thing I've worked on in months." Kira tilted her head, listening intently. Whether she understood his words or just enjoyed the sound of his voice, Marcus couldn't tell, but it felt good to talk to someone, even a child who couldn't respond. "Almost got it," Marcus murmured, making a final adjustment. The wing joint realigned with a satisfying click, and the toy's eyes glowed a bright blue. "Let's test it." Marcus set the dragon toy on the workbench and activated its power core. With a whir of tiny servos, the mechanical creature stood up, stretched its wings, and gave a miniature roar. Colored sparks, harmless but beautiful, flickered from its mouth. Kira squealed with delight, clapping her scaled hands together. "Good as new," Marcus grinned, picking up the toy and offering it to her. "Maybe even better." As Kira reached for her beloved toy, the repair station door slid open with a forceful hiss. Marcus's heart sank as 3 towering draconian guards stepped into the room, their ceremonial armor gleaming under the workshop lights. Behind them, an even larger figure entered, a draconian noble, judging by the intricate patterns on his scales and the ornate clothing he wore. "Oh no," Marcus whispered, instinctively moving to stand between Kira and the newcomers. "I can explain." To his surprise, Kira chirped happily and ran toward the noble draconian, clutching her repaired toy. The large draconian knelt, examining the toy with an unreadable expression, then looked up at Marcus with piercing golden eyes. Marcus stood frozen, certain his life was about to end. Humans had been warned repeatedly about the strict protocols regarding draconian children. Direct contact without proper authorization was forbidden. The noble rose to his full height, nearly 8 feet tall, and approached. Marcus forced himself not to step back, keeping his hands visible and his expression neutral. "You fixed my daughter's cherished possession," the draconian said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate the air itself. The translator rendered his words in perfect standard, without the usual delay. "I did, sir," Marcus replied, somehow keeping his voice steady. She was upset. "I couldn't turn her away." The draconian studied him for a long moment. Most would have called security immediately. "She was crying," Marcus said simply. "Where I come from, you don't ignore a child in distress, regardless of species." Something changed in the draconian's expression, a subtle shift that Marcus couldn't interpret. "And you are?" "Marcus Dean, sir. Station mechanic, Bay 4. "Mechanic," the draconian repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yet you handled a piece of draconian artisanry with skill and respect." Marcus shrugged slightly. "It's just a toy with a broken wing. The principles are universal, even if the technology is different." The draconian gestured to one of his guards, who stepped forward and presented a small device. "A scanner of some kind." "May I?" the noble asked, indicating Marcus's workbench. Not seeing much choice, Marcus nodded. The guard swept the device over Marcus's tools in the area where he had repaired the toy. Data scrolled across its surface in draconian script. Interesting, the noble murmured. No specialized tools for draconian technology. No forbidden scanning equipment. You truly repaired this using only human ingenuity and, what do your people call it? Mechanical intuition. I just fixed a broken toy, sir, Marcus said, growing uncomfortable with the scrutiny. The draconian's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. You are either exceptionally humble or exceptionally unaware of what you've accomplished. He turned to Kira, who was happily making the toy dragon fly in circles. My daughter has not stopped talking about this toy since it was damaged 3 cycles ago. Our own technicians claimed it would need to be replaced. The neural matrix was supposedly corrupted beyond repair. Marcus blinked in surprise. Neural matrix? It's just a toy. A learning companion, the draconian corrected. Patterned after our ancestral forms, containing educational programs and memory storage for my daughter's early development. He fixed Marcus with that piercing gaze again. Had it truly been lost, a piece of her childhood would have been lost with it. I'm glad I could help, Marcus said sincerely. She seemed pretty attached to it. The draconian nodded solemnly. I am called Thaxos, he said, in what seemed to be an afterthought. You have my gratitude, Marcus Dean. With that, he turned and gestured to his daughter, who chirped a happy farewell to Marcus before taking her father's clawed hand. The entourage departed as swiftly as they had arrived, leaving Marcus alone in his workshop, wondering if he had imagined the entire encounter. As Marcus finished closing the repair bay for the night, his comm unit buzzed with an incoming message, a formal commendation from Draconian Diplomatic Services for technical excellence and compassionate assistance. Along with it came authorization for access to previously restricted technical databases. Marcus stared at the notification in disbelief. Such access was unheard of for humans, especially those in service positions. What had just happened? Little did Marcus know, the draconian he had met was no ordinary noble. Thaxos was the emperor of the entire Draconian Empire, making a rare and secret visit to the station for diplomatic purposes. And Marcus had just unwittingly performed what the Draconians considered a sacred act, helping a child in need with no expectation of reward. As Marcus made his way back to the human residential sector, rumors were already spreading throughout the station. Humans were being summoned for interviews with Draconian officials. Engineering positions, previously closed to humanity, were suddenly open for applications. Something had changed in the careful diplomatic dance between humans and one of the Confederation's most powerful founding species. All because a mechanic had fixed a crying hatchling's toy, unaware that the Dragon Emperor watched. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his repair bay to find it unusually busy. A line of station residents, not just humans, but representatives from a dozen species, waited outside with various devices in need of repair. News traveled fast on a space station. What's all this? Marcus asked Terry, another human mechanic who worked the bay next to his. Terry grinned. You're famous, man. Word is you impressed some big-shot Draconian yesterday. Everyone wants the human with the magic hands to fix their stuff now. Marcus groaned. I just fixed a toy. A royal toy. Terry corrected. Belonging to the daughter of someone very important, apparently. Station administration has been in chaos since last night. There's talk of a human delegation being invited to Draconia Prime. Before Marcus could respond, his supervisor hurried over, looking simultaneously terrified and excited. Dean, there you are. You have visitors. Important visitors. In the administrative conference room. The supervisor lowered his voice. Draconian High Command representatives. And, he swallowed visibly, Ambassador Chun from Earth. Marcus felt his stomach drop. What? Why would they want to see me? Just go, the supervisor hissed. And for all our sakes, be polite. As Marcus made his way to the administrative level, an area he had never visited before, he tried to make sense of what was happening. All he had done was fix a toy for a crying child. Any decent person would have done the same. The conference room door slid open as he approached, revealing a scene that momentarily stopped him in his tracks. Seated around a large table were 3 Draconian officials in formal attire, the human ambassador from Earth, and 2 Confederation diplomats. standing near a viewport, looking out at the stars, was Thaxos himself. Marcus Dean, announced one of the Confederation representatives. As requested, all eyes turned to him. Marcus resisted the urge to check if his uniform was clean. "Mr. Dean," Ambassador Chen said, rising to greet him. "Thank you for joining us. Please have a seat." As Marcus sat in the offered chair, feeling distinctly out of place, Thaxos turned from the viewport. "Yesterday, the Draconian Emperor began without preamble. I witnessed something unexpected. A human, with no advanced tools or specialized training in Draconian technology, repaired a device that our own specialists deemed beyond salvage." One of the Draconian officials slid a data pad across the table. On its screen was a technical breakdown of the toy Marcus had fixed, with specific notations about the neural matrix and its self-healing properties. "This is not merely a toy," the official explained. "It is a sophisticated learning companion with a simplified version of our ancestral intelligence algorithms. When damaged, these matrices typically collapse entirely. I just realigned the power flow and reset the system," Marcus said, looking at the schematics. The physical damage was minor. It was disrupting the energy distribution. Once that was fixed, the system recovered on its own. The Draconians exchanged glances. "That is precisely what is fascinating," Thaxos said. "You approached the problem differently than our specialists. They attempted to directly repair the neural pathways. You simply created the conditions for self-healing." Ambassador Chen leaned forward. "Emperor Thaxos has made an unprecedented proposal. A cultural and technological exchange program, with humans working alongside Draconian engineers." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Because I fixed a toy? Because you demonstrated a quality we have perhaps underestimated in humans," Thaxos said. "Adaptability, creative problem-solving, and," he glanced at his officials before continuing, "compassion without calculation. You helped a child not for political advantage or personal gain, but simply because she needed help." One of the Confederation diplomats, a tall, insectoid Vexillian, made a clicking sound of disapproval. "The Emperor's proposal is premature. Humans have been part of the Confederation for barely 6 years. Their technology is primitive, their diplomatic standing minimal. And yet," Thaxos countered, "this human solved a problem our experts could not. Perhaps there is value in different perspectives. Perhaps there is something to be learned from even the youngest species among us." Marcus listened to the debate, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. He was just a mechanic, not a diplomat or a scientist. Yet somehow, he had become the center of a major interspecies policy discussion. "If I may," Marcus finally interrupted, causing all conversation to cease immediately. "I'm honored by the attention, but I'm just one person who happened to fix one broken toy. I don't represent all of humanity's potential." Thaxos fixed those golden eyes on him again. "Perhaps not. But you have provided a glimpse of what humans might offer the Confederation beyond manual labor. A fresh perspective, unorthodox solutions, compassion without agenda." The Draconian Emperor turned to address the entire room. "My decision is made. The exchange program will proceed, beginning with this human." He nodded toward Marcus. "Me?" Marcus asked, startled. "You have demonstrated both technical skill and appropriate cultural sensitivity," Thaxos stated. "You will be the first human technical advisor to the Draconian Engineering Guild." Ambassador Chen looked as shocked as Marcus felt. "Emperor Thaxos, while we are deeply honored by this opportunity, Mr. Dean is a station mechanic, not a diplomatic. The position is technical, not diplomatic," Thaxos interrupted. "And I have seen his work firsthand." With that, the matter appeared to be settled. The meeting continued with details of the exchange program, timeline, and expectations, while Marcus sat in stunned silence, wondering how fixing a broken toy had led to becoming the first human to work directly with the Draconian Empire's most guarded technological secrets. As the meeting concluded, Thaxos approached Marcus privately. "There is something else you should know," the Emperor said, his voice lowered. "My presence on this station was meant to be secret. I was here to evaluate humanity's potential contribution to the Confederation personally. You were being observed long before you noticed my daughter in your workshop. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. You were testing me? Not intentionally, Thaxos admitted. Kira's toy was genuinely broken, and she was truly distressed. But when she slipped away from her guardians and found her way to your repair bay, I saw an opportunity to observe a human in their natural environment, without the performance anxiety of formal evaluation. So all of this, the exchange program, my new position, it's because I passed some test I didn't know I was taking? Thaxos made a sound that might have been a draconian chuckle. No, Marcus Dean. It is because you demonstrated that humanity has something unique to offer. Something even we, with all our advanced technology and ancient wisdom, may have forgotten. The simple kindness of helping a child in need, with no thought of reward or consequence. The Emperor's expression turned solemn. That is rarer in the Confederation than you might think. As Marcus left the conference room, his mind reeling from the morning's events, he couldn't help but wonder what other consequences might arise from his simple act of compassion. The universe, it seemed, was far more complex, and perhaps far more hopeful than he had believed. But one thing was certain. The Draconians were watching humanity closely now. And for the first time since Earth joined the Confederation, they were watching with interest rather than disdain. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Imperial Draconian vessel Eternal Flame, watching as the massive ship approached Draconia Prime. The planet glowed like a jewel against the velvet backdrop of space, its atmosphere shimmering with protective energy fields that had kept the Draconian homeworld safe for millennia. Magnificent, isn't it? Asked Larrick, a Draconian engineer who had become something of a mentor to Marcus during the journey. It's beautiful, Marcus agreed, barely able to take his eyes off the view. I never thought I'd see it in person. Larrick made a trilling sound that Marcus had come to recognize as amusement. Few non-Draconians ever do. You should feel honored. Marcus did feel honored, but also profoundly out of his depth. In the weeks since his encounter with Emperor Thaxos and his daughter, Marcus had been thrust into a crash course on Draconian culture, technology, and protocol. The learning curve had been nearly vertical. The Engineering Guild representatives will meet us at the Imperial landing field, Larrick explained, checking a holographic display that hovered above his wrist device. There will be a formal reception tonight, where the Emperor will officially present you to the Guild Masters. Marcus tugged at the collar of his new uniform, a modified version of traditional Draconian technical attire, altered to accommodate human anatomy. Will Kira be there? He asked, thinking of the young hatchling whose toy had changed the course of his life. The Imperial Princess rarely attends formal functions, Larrick replied. She is still quite young by our standards. Princess. The word still shocked Marcus. He had fixed a toy for the daughter of the most powerful being in Draconian space, possibly in the entire Confederation. Sometimes he still woke up convinced it had all been an elaborate dream. Approaching final orbital position, announced the ship's communication system. All passengers prepare for atmospheric entry. Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. This was really happening. He was about to become the first human to set foot on Draconia Prime, the first to work with the legendarily secretive Engineering Guild. All because he couldn't turn away a crying child. The descent to the planet's surface was smoother than any atmospheric entry Marcus had experienced before. Draconian inertial dampening technology was centuries beyond what humans had developed. Through the viewports, Marcus watched as the misty upper atmosphere gave way to reveal sprawling cities of crystal and metal, their spires reaching skyward as if attempting to touch the stars. The Imperial landing field was a vast plaza of polished stone, surrounded by towering structures that seemed to defy gravity. As the ship settled onto its landing struts, Marcus could see a delegation waiting, Draconians in elaborate ceremonial armor and formal attire, standing in precise formation. Remember the protocols we discussed, Larrick reminded him as they prepared to disembark. Bow to the Guild Masters, but do not lower your gaze completely. That suggests submission rather than respect. Speak only when addressed directly. And whatever you do, Do not mention the incident with the princess's toy unless the Emperor brings it up first. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Got it. The reception committee was even more intimidating up close. 7 guild masters, each wearing ceremonial robes embellished with technical schematics woven in metallic thread. Behind them stood a contingent of Imperial guards, their armor gleaming in the golden light of Draconia's sun. Lyric led the way, making formal introductions in the complex Draconian language that Marcus's translator implant rendered into somewhat stilted standard. The guild masters regarded Marcus with expressions ranging from open curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. "So this is the human who impressed our emperor," said one of the older masters. His scales faded to a pale blue with age. "You are smaller than I expected." Marcus bowed as instructed. "Thank you for welcoming me to your world, Master Zendirax. I look forward to learning from your wisdom." The old Draconian's eyes narrowed slightly, perhaps surprised that Marcus had remembered his name from the introduction. "We shall see what learning occurs, and in which direction it flows." Before the conversation could continue, a ripple of movement passed through the assembled Draconians. Guards snapped to attention, and the guild masters turned as one toward the far end of the landing field, where a procession was approaching. "The Emperor," Lyric whispered to Marcus. "Remember, bow deeply, don't speak unless spoken to," Marcus finished. "I remember." Emperor Thaxos moved with the fluid grace that all Draconians possessed, but with an added weight of authority that seemed to bend the very air around him. His scales gleamed with a rich golden hue that Marcus hadn't noticed during their previous encounter, possibly enhanced by the natural sunlight of his homeworld. But what caught Marcus off guard was the small figure walking beside the Emperor, clutching a familiar mechanical toy dragon. Princess Kira insisted on being present, Thaxos explained as he approached, his resonant voice carrying easily across the open space. She wished to see her friend again. Kira chirped happily when she spotted Marcus, and before any of the assembled dignitaries could react, she darted forward and wrapped her small arms around his legs in an unmistakable hug. A collective gasp rose from the Draconian officials. Marcus froze, unsure of the protocol for being embraced by an imperial princess in public. He looked helplessly at Lyric, who appeared equally stunned. Emperor Thaxos, however, simply made that rumbling sound that passed for Draconian laughter. "It seems my daughter has made her own diplomatic decisions," he said, approaching Marcus. "You may greet her properly, Marcus Dean. She has spoken of little else but your arrival for many days." Carefully, Marcus knelt to Kira's level. "Hello again, Princess. I see your dragon is still working well." Kira nodded enthusiastically, holding up the toy for his inspection. The mechanical dragon flapped its wings and emitted a small puff of colored sparks. "Zenith flies better now," Kira said, her words translated by Marcus's implant. "You fixed him good. I'm glad." Marcus smiled, genuinely touched by her enthusiasm. He looked up to find Emperor Thaxos watching them with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. "Come," the Emperor said after a moment. "There will be time for formalities later. For now, Marcus Dean, let us show you where you will be working." To the evident surprise of the guild masters, Thaxos himself led Marcus through the sprawling complex that housed the engineering guild's central facilities. Princess Kira skipped alongside them, occasionally pointing out features she found interesting or important. "The tall towers make the weather nice," she explained, pointing to massive structures that seemed to pulse with energy. "And the shiny bridges take you anywhere fast." "Your standard is very good, Princess," Marcus commented, impressed by how well she communicated despite her young age. "I have been learning," Kira said proudly. "Father says I should know how to speak with all species. I like human words. They are bouncy." Thaxos glanced down at his daughter with evident affection. Kira has always had an aptitude for languages. It will serve her well when she eventually takes the throne. The Engineering Guild headquarters was a marvel of architecture and technology. Vast open spaces housed projects at various stages of development, with Draconian engineers moving purposefully among holographic displays and experimental apparatus. Energy fields contained potentially dangerous tests, their boundaries shimmering with iridescent light. This will be your primary workspace. Thaxos indicated a section that had been cleared and equipped with tools that appeared to be a hybrid of draconian and human design. The guild masters were uncertain which methods you would prefer, so they attempted to accommodate both approaches. Marcus examined the workspace with growing excitement. Despite the intimidating circumstances, he couldn't help but feel a surge of professional curiosity. The technology surrounding him represented the pinnacle of engineering achievement in known space. "May I ask what exactly I'll be working on?" Marcus asked, careful to keep his tone respectful. Thaxos gestured to one of the guild masters, who stepped forward holding what appeared to be a small cube of translucent material. Within it, intricate patterns of light shifted and flowed like liquid. "This is a neural matrix compiler," the master explained, placing the cube on a workstation. "Similar to, but far more complex than, the one contained in the princess's toy companion. We have encountered difficulties with certain applications." Marcus studied the cube without touching it. "What kind of difficulties?" "Instability," another master said. "The matrices function perfectly in certain applications, toys, simple assistants, basic utility systems. But when we attempt to scale them for more complex operations, they become erratic. Unpredictable. We have been working on this problem for decades," Thaxos added. "Our best minds have approached it from every angle we can conceive. Yet the solution eludes us." Marcus frowned slightly. "And you think I might see something you've missed?" "With respect, Emperor, your technology is far beyond anything humans have developed. Perhaps that is precisely why you might succeed where we have failed," Thaxos said thoughtfully. "You are not constrained by our established thinking. You demonstrated this when you repaired Kira's toy. Our specialists focused on the damaged neural pathways, attempting to rebuild them. You focused on the supporting systems, creating conditions where the matrix could heal itself." One of the older guild masters made a dismissive gesture. "A simple toy is one thing, Emperor. The applications we are discussing are far more sophisticated. Yet the underlying principles are the same," Thaxos countered. "Neural matrices, regardless of complexity, follow similar patterns of organization and self-repair." As the Draconians debated, Kira tugged at Marcus's sleeve. When he looked down, she held up her toy dragon, which she had called Zenith. "Zenith was sad when he couldn't fly," she said quietly. "His memories were getting lost. But you helped him remember." Something about the way she phrased it caught Marcus's attention. "Memories? The toy has memories." Kira nodded solemnly. "He remembers me. He learns games with me. He knows what makes me happy." Marcus looked thoughtfully at the cube on the workstation, then back at the toy dragon. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hand for Zenith. Kira handed him the toy with a trust that touched him deeply. Marcus examined it carefully, comparing its visible components with what he could see of the cube's structure. The neural matrix in Zenith, in the toy, it's designed to form attachments, isn't it? Emotional connections with its owner. The guild masters exchanged glances. "That is correct," one finally confirmed. "The companion matrices are programmed to develop affinity patterns based on interaction. But the larger matrices," Marcus continued, thinking aloud, "the ones you're trying to scale up for more complex applications, they're isolated, aren't they? They don't have anything to form connections with." A moment of silence followed his observation. "The matrices are contained in controlled environments for safety and stability," a guild master explained, as if to a child. "They cannot be allowed to form random attachments." Marcus nodded slowly. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'No man is an island.' It means that people need connections to thrive, to be stable. What if your neural matrices are the same? What if they need relationships, connections, to remain stable as they grow more complex?" The concept seemed to surprise the Draconians. Several began speaking at once in their native language, too rapidly for Marcus's translator to keep up. Emperor Thaxos raised a hand, silencing the debate. "An interesting theory. How would you propose to test it, Marcus Dean?" Marcus looked at the toy dragon in his hands, then at the cube on the workstation. If I understand correctly, both use the same basic technology, just at different scales of complexity, right? When the guild masters nodded, Marcus continued. Then let's try introducing elements from Zenith's programming into your experimental matrix. Not a complete integration, but enough to see if the attachment protocols have a stabilizing effect. Preposterous, one master objected. We cannot contaminate advanced research with programming from a child's toy. With respect, Marcus countered, that child's toy has a functioning neural matrix that has remained stable for years, despite physical damage. Maybe there's something to learn from that success. Emperor Thaxos studied Marcus for a long moment, then turned to the guild masters. Prepare a controlled test environment. We will try the humans' approach. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Marcus worked alongside the initially reluctant but increasingly engaged guild masters, carefully extracting key elements from Zenith's programming and adapting them for the experimental matrix. Princess Kira remained for much of the process, watching with solemn interest as they worked with her beloved toy, until she eventually fell asleep in a chair specially brought for her. The affinity algorithms are remarkably elegant, one of the younger masters admitted as they reviewed the code. Simple, yet effective. That's often the best engineering, Marcus replied, careful not to sound condescending. Elegant simplicity. By the time they were ready to test their modifications, word had spread throughout the complex. Additional guild members had gathered to observe, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly curious about the humans' approach. Neural matrix integration at 60%, announced one of the technicians monitoring the process. Stability readings holding steady. Marcus held his breath as the indicators on the monitoring equipment remained firmly in the green zone. The modified matrix glowed with a soft, pulsating light within its containment field. 70%, 80%, 90%. A warning tone sounded as the integration approached completion. One of the displays flashed amber. Fluctuation detected, the technician reported. Matrix showing signs of distress. Marcus studied the readings, then looked at the matrix itself. Something was missing. The matrix was accepting the programming, but it had no actual connection to form, nothing to anchor it. It needs something to bond with, Marcus realized aloud. Not just the programming, but an actual relationship. Before anyone could stop him, he reached out and placed his hand on the containment field. It wasn't meant to be a barrier, merely a monitoring boundary, and his fingers passed through, making contact with the cube. A ripple of alarm passed through the assembled Draconians, but Emperor Thaxos raised a hand, silencing their objections. Let us see. At Marcus's touch, the matrix's light pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady, harmonious rhythm. The warning tones ceased, and the displays returned to green. Integration complete, the technician announced, sounding astonished. Matrix stability at 97%, the highest reading we've ever achieved. The guild masters stared in disbelief, first at the readings, then at Marcus, who carefully withdrew his hand from the containment field. What did you do? One demanded. Marcus shook his head, as surprised as they were. I just made contact. I thought it needed a connection, something real rather than theoretical. You formed a rudimentary affinity bond, Thaxos said quietly. Similar to what occurs between Kira and her toy companion, but with a much more complex matrix. Kira, who had awakened during the commotion, approached the workstation. Is it happy now? She asked, looking at the glowing cube. I think so, Marcus answered, though he had no scientific basis for the claim. Yet somehow he felt it was true. The matrix seemed content. Fascinating, murmured one of the older guild masters, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. We have always approached the matrices as pure technology. It never occurred to us that they might require emotional connection for optimal function. But they're based on your own neural patterns, aren't they? Marcus asked. And Draconians need connections too. Your families, your clans, your empire. It's all built on relationships. Emperor Thaxos regarded Marcus with new appreciation. Once again, you have shown us something that was right before our eyes, yet invisible to us. Perhaps there is more that humans can teach the Draconian Empire than we realized. In the days that followed, Marcus worked closely with the Engineering Guild, applying his insights to a range of draconian technologies. The initial breakthrough led to others, as the engineers began to reconsider their fundamental assumptions about neural matrices and their applications. Word spread throughout the Confederation. The Draconian Empire, long known for its technological superiority and isolationist tendencies, had embraced collaboration with the newest, least advanced species in galactic society. Other Confederation members watched with growing interest as joint human-draconian projects yielded unexpected innovations. 6 months after his arrival on Draconia Prime, Marcus found himself once again in the Imperial Palace, this time for a formal ceremony marking the expansion of the exchange program. 20 more humans, engineers, scientists, and technicians had been selected to join him, the first wave of what promised to be a new era of cooperation. As Marcus stood with his fellow humans, watching Emperor Thaxos address the assembled dignitaries, he felt a familiar tug at his sleeve. Princess Kira, now a frequent visitor to his workshop, slipped her small clawed hand into his. "Father says you're staying," she whispered, looking up at him with those bright amber eyes. "Is that true?" Marcus nodded. "If that's okay with you, Princess." Kira's face lit up with delight. "Zenith will be happy. He likes you." "I like him too," Marcus smiled. "And I like it here." It was true. Despite the initial challenges and cultural adjustments, Marcus had found a home among the Draconians. His work was more fulfilling than anything he had experienced before, and the respect he had earned, not just from Emperor Thaxos and Princess Kira, but from the guild masters and their apprentices, gave him a sense of purpose he had never known on the station. As the ceremony concluded, Ambassador Chen approached Marcus. "You've become quite the diplomat, Dean," she said with a wry smile. "When I first met you, you were fixing coffee makers in a repair bay. Now you're revolutionizing draconian technology and changing interspecies relations." Marcus shrugged modestly. "I just fixed a toy, Ambassador. Everything else just happened." "Don't underestimate what you've accomplished," Chen said seriously. "Humanity's position in the Confederation has been transformed. The Draconians speak of us as partners now, not primitives. Other species are reconsidering their assessments of human potential." Before Marcus could respond, Emperor Thaxos joined them, Princess Kira still holding Marcus's hand. "Ambassador Chen speaks the truth," the Emperor said. "But perhaps the most valuable lesson has been for the Draconian Empire itself." He looked down at his daughter, then back at Marcus. "We had forgotten something important. That true advancement comes not just from technological sophistication, but from connection, from compassion, from seeing value in others, regardless of their development stage or social status." Marcus felt a swell of pride, not for himself, but for humanity. "We may be new to the galactic community, Emperor, but humans have been learning those lessons throughout our history. Sometimes the hard way. The best lessons often are learned thus," Thaxos agreed. "Now, I believe Princess Kira has a request for you." Kira looked up eagerly. "Zenith has a new friend," she announced, producing a second mechanical dragon from a pouch at her waist. This one was slightly larger than her original toy. It scales a deep blue rather than gold. But his wing is stuck. "Can you fix him?" Marcus knelt to examine the toy, aware of the symbolism of the moment. A human mechanic, once again fixing a toy for a draconian princess, but this time surrounded by the highest officials of two civilizations, with the full weight of diplomatic significance behind the simple act. "I'd be honored, Princess," he said, taking the toy carefully in his hands. "Let's see what's wrong with your friend." As Marcus worked, deftly adjusting the wing mechanism with tools that were now a familiar extension of his hands, he reflected on how drastically his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been an anonymous mechanic on a distant outpost, fixing appliances and dreaming of the engineering career he'd left behind on Earth. Now he was at the center of a technological and cultural revolution, all because he hadn't been able to turn away from a crying child. The blue dragon's wing clicked into place, and the toy came to life, stretching and testing its repaired appendage. Kira clapped her hands in delight. "Thank you, Marcus," she exclaimed. "They're both happy now." "That's what matters," Marcus said, glancing up to find Emperor Thaxos watching him with that same inscrutable expression he'd worn during their first meeting. This time, however, Marcus understood what it meant. Respect. Not just for him personally, but for what he represented. Humanity's unique contribution to a galactic civilization that had thought it had nothing left to learn. As the new human delegation began their orientation, as diplomatic agreements were formalized and technological collaborations expanded, as the Confederation adjusted to the shifting balance of influence among its member species, one simple truth remained at the heart of it all. Sometimes the most powerful act is the smallest kindness, offered freely to those in need. And sometimes, the most important audience is the one you don't know is watching. Years later, when asked how the historic alliance between humans and Draconians began, historians would point to complex diplomatic negotiations, technological exchanges, and strategic interests. But those who knew the truth, including a certain mechanic and a young Draconian princess, remembered it differently. It all started when a human mechanic fixed a crying hatchling's toy, unaware that the Dragon Emperor watched. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.